The story takes place in the bitter December of 1919, when the soil of Europe had not yet fully dried from the stains of blood, and the pens of the victorious nations were severing the very veins of the defeated. It is the story of 10-year-old Fritz, who lived in a small apartment in Berlin, a boy for whom the war had meant only his father's absence and the constant dampness in his mother's eyes. But the war was over now, so why did his mother's eyes seem even more hollow than before? Fritz remembered clearly the day when their plump neighbor Frau Meyer had said over a cup of tea, "Now the harsh terms have been imposed upon us by the Allied nations. We were humiliated in the Palace of Versailles." At the time, Fritz had not understood what business the affairs of a grand palace had with the bread in his own home, but as the days passed, he began to understand. The first winter brought cold that crept into every corner. The stove in their kitchen was lit less and less often. Coal ration cards had stopped coming because most of the coal was being shipped to France as reparations. Fritz's mother, Helene, would stand in line for bread before dawn, but the bread was so dark and hard that one risked breaking a tooth. One day Fritz asked, "Mama, what are these harsh terms?" Helene pulled him onto her lap, though he was 10 and rather too big for it. In her arms he was still her child. She said, "Son, we lost the war. Now the victors have piled a debt upon us, a debt so great that many generations would have to work to pay it off. Our factories belong to them, our land belongs to them, and our army has been reduced so much that the police force is larger than our military." Fritz came to understand her words when he saw Master Schulz, his schoolteacher who had been wounded in the war, selling matches on the street. His uniform was tattered, but his mustache was still trimmed in the style of a soldier. One day Fritz stopped beside him and asked, "Master Schulz, why don't you come to school anymore?" Schulz, his hands trembling from the cold, held out a matchbox and said, "School? That's only for the children of the rich now, Fritz. The Treaty of Versailles cut our education budget as well. Now we have nothing to do but pay the debt." That day Fritz bought a box of matches. Though there was no need for matches at home, there was hardly any coal to light a fire anyway. He placed that box in his little cupboard like a keepsake. The second blow came when French soldiers occupied the Ruhr region. Fritz's father, a railway worker, joined the strike in protest, but a strike meant no wages at all. One evening father returned home. His face bore a hardness Fritz had never seen before. In his hand was a newspaper whose headline read, "The Treaty of Versailles conditions that strangle our soul." Slammed his fist on the table. "They have declared us guilty, the sole culprit of the entire war, and now they demand reparations so great that our children will starve." Tried to calm him. "Quiet, the neighbors will hear. Let them hear, let the whole world hear." Father's voice cracked. "Our army is gone, our territory taken, our pride trampled into the mud. This is not peace, this is fanning the flames of another war." He could not sleep that night. From his window he saw a group of former soldiers gathered on the street. One of them strummed a guitar and they began to sing old patriotic songs, but their voices were thick with bitterness. To Fritz it seemed they were not singing but weeping. Time passed. In Fritz's school new maps were hung, maps showing Germany's diminished territory. One day the teacher made the class write Article 231 of the treaty, acceptance of war guilt. Fritz wrote that passage many times, but a question lingered in his mind. Who had truly started the war? His father said everyone was at fault, so why was the punishment heaped solely upon them? One day his little sister Greta fell ill. The doctor said it was malnutrition and a lack of medicine. Helene looked at the expensive prescriptions from French pharmaceutical companies and gave up in despair. That night Fritz saw his father sitting in the kitchen, head in his hands. Father whispered, "Our mark is becoming worthless. Yesterday a loaf of bread cost 100,000 marks, today it's 200,000. My wages stay the same." Understood inflation. He had heard the word for the first time, but its meaning he grasped through his own empty stomach. On his 10th birthday, Fritz received no gift. His mother gave him an old postage stamp bearing the image of Kaiser Wilhelm. "This is a relic of the old Germany, my son, when our nation stood with pride." Fritz placed the stamp beside the matchbox in his cupboard. Gradually a strange restlessness spread through the streets. People spoke less, but their eyes said a great deal. Some said, "This peace is too harsh, it will not last." Others said, "We must rise again whatever the cost." Once Fritz asked his father, "Papa, will these harsh terms last forever?" Father put a hand on his head. "Son, when people are hungry and their honor is crushed, they either break completely or they nurture a passion that can set the whole world ablaze. I am afraid these terms are sowing the seeds of a new war." That night Fritz fell asleep, but in his dreams he saw the great doors of the Palace of Versailles inscribed with 3 words: humiliation, poverty, revenge. He tried to open them, but they were bound with chains, and on each link was carved the name of a nation: France, England, America. When he woke, his mother stood before him with a small piece of bread. "Eat, son. Today we got a little extra." Fritz broke the bread, set aside a portion for his sick little sister, and ate the rest in silence. He looked out the window. Snow was falling, and in the distance he heard a newspaper vendor's cry: "Protests against the Treaty of Versailles. Unemployment rises." That day Fritz understood that harsh terms were not merely clauses on paper. They were the story of bread rations, of sick sisters, of shattered dreams, and of schoolteachers selling matches on street corners. He understood that war is fought not only on battlefields but also at peace conference tables, and its price is paid in the hunger of children. That day he made a silent promise to himself. When he grew up, he would help build a world where no child of a defeated nation would have to learn what harsh terms meant. But alongside that promise, his father's words echoed in his heart. These terms are sowing the seeds of a new war. Fritz did not know that before his vow could be fulfilled, the world would have to burn once more, and that he himself would one day stand in that fire. But this story does not end here, for the story had only begun on that December evening when a 10-year-old boy, holding an old German stamp and a box of matches, searched for his future in the frozen mist of his own breath. And history bears witness. The harsh terms of Versailles were indeed too harsh. They did not merely humiliate a nation, they pushed all of humanity toward another bloody war. This story is that warning, the same warning that echoed through a Berlin street on that wintry evening and still echoes wherever the arrogance of victory forces the defeated to bow to the ground.